What is up, y'all? Special edition of the Coast to Coast podcast coming at you. Big news to break, brought to you by Congruity and Johnny T-shirt. All right, I'm Joey Powell. We are here for an emergency edition of the Coast to Coast podcast. I want to make sure you guys know about breaking news. That's usually why we do these. But as we are sitting here recording this, Tyzhaun Claude, a power forward, 6'8", 230 and change from Georgia Tech, has transferred to North Carolina. He has been at both Georgia Tech and Western Carolina before, but entered the transfer portal, I guess, back in August, 1st of August, so just a couple of days ago, and then it came down to North Carolina never really stopped looking for a big after Van Allen Lubin committed. They tried talking to Julius Halafanua. That didn't work out. And we assumed that was the end of the process because there was no one else internationally on the UNC radar. When all of a sudden, and Sherella said it 1,000 times, the roster's never set until the semester starts. Well, the semester starts in just a couple of days. Claude, who's from Goldsboro, entered the portal a couple of months ago, found out that he was cleared and eligible next season very recently. So UNC then made immediate contact, started to recruit him. I think he looked into Georgetown as well. But this is one of the situations where it's not that North Carolina is not confident in the players that it has on its roster. This is a guy who has ACC experience in the post, even on a team that wasn't very good last year. But when you have an opportunity to make an addition like this, you go ahead and do so. And this is a Geico player. It's great insurance. And when you know that the ACC season can add injuries, can take players away, can limit availability, I think you jump at a situation like this. Sean, I appreciate you being here, man. Tell us what you know about Mr. Claude's game and why it is important for Hubert Davis and his staff.
Well, I like the Geico insurance. That I think that one fits. And then he did actually start at Morehead State, so he's definitely well traveled in terms of the number of schools and different types of play he has been at. So last year at Georgia Tech played 17 minutes a game, average under 5 points. So nothing that's going to jump out or kind of get people excited based on the stats. But I think at this point in time, you have the extra scholarships. It does add a piece of depth. I think a few weeks ago when we were looking at Julius, he would have added a different component. And when they're looking at him, obviously love the 7 foot and the size, which UNC didn't have. This one's a little different where you're looking at kind of a power forward in a 5 body. So you're getting a guy who's 6'8", so a little bit undersized, but one that does play in the post. But in terms of skill set, the one thing I really do like is the offensive rebounding ability. So when you're just looking at strictly from more on a per minute basis, he was actually number 1 in the ACC in offensive rebounding percentage in conference play. But that's been kind of probably his forte offensively across the board at whatever level he's been at. And I think we've always wonder, once Armando has left UNC, how is UNC going to be on the offensive glass? So I think when he does potentially play off the bench, what's like one thing he's going to do very well? So we know offensive rebounding will be that one aspect. From staying on the offensive side, he can score around the basket. He's definitely not an outside threat at all. So anytime he would catch the ball outside, teams are going to back up off of him. So it won't help stretching the floor, but he can roll the basket. He can finish to a certain, he's capable around the basket, I'll say. And he has that veteran experience. Same time, especially with Cadeau and the guards that UNC have, he does excel running in transition. So he's a guy that he can rebound, and he's going to hustle up the floor, and you can dump off. He can fill the lane, etc. So a threat in transition. And then finally defensively, we mentioned he's going to be undersized. Unfortunately, when you're looking at some of the synergy ratings, whether it was at Georgia Tech or at some of his previous schools, they have not been overly kind in terms of his defensive rating. From a block perspective, I think he had 3 against UNC last year and had one of his better games, 9-8, 9-8, and 3. So block rating has been pretty strong and decent, but I think when you're looking at almost a defensive stopper, a lot of it is going to be situational. I think in terms of the games he's playing, and will that time kind of go up or down based on the plethora of big men that UNC has put together this season.
Something else I'll say is, going back, his coach Damon Stoudemire at Georgia Tech called him a lunch pail guy. And if we know anything, is that Hubert Davis loves a few things. He loves shooters and he loves dudes. And when I hear Damon Stoudemire say that about him being kind of a lunch pail guy and a guy that's willing to work, that to me strikes me as a dude that will come in. And Sherelle's not here, so I can say this: iron sharpens iron. And if you've got another guy in practice that's got a grown man's body and the physique that he has to work in that post rotation, I think it kind of, the tide rises all boats in this situation, don't you?
Yeah, and once again, I think it, especially when you're looking at very different body types and frames for UNC's bigs, I think it just adds a different dynamic. Once again, as a depth piece, we're not talking about that 5-star that's going to come in and play 30 minutes a game, right? So I think you have to just have your expectations properly set. But to your point, I think it adds a different dynamic. He's not coming in and 18 years old and needs to get in the weight room. He's been in the weight room and he can handle that aspect, as well as what you would think would be the type of role that he would be, the coaching staff will be looking for, as well as fitting into a team dynamic versus going to maybe a smaller power 5 school or mid-major and trying to get his 10 plus points and 7 to 8 rebounds a game like he did prior to coming to Georgia Tech.
And also, to help kind of give folks some context, as we're doing this emergency pod, is Tyzhaun Claude is committed to North Carolina, transferring to UNC from Georgia Tech, joining the Tar Heels out of the portal. The big thing about this is, UNC had 2 scholarships left going into the season. This doesn't hurt them with regard to the recruiting for 2025. It does not hurt them with regard to anything they've got going on right now. This is just literally a guy that has played ACC level basketball coming in to be some depth. And I mentioned earlier, we talk about injuries, how that can sometimes affect players. Academics can sometimes be an issue. I mean, there's all these different things that can have a player, leave the roster or not be available for an entire season. So when you have this sort of insurance chip to back that up and make your practices a little more intense. I mean, Sean, it wasn't too long ago that, North Carolina didn't have enough bodies to have a full practice, right? Like, it was just a couple of seasons ago.
And I think especially when you look at this year's team, once again, a lot of it is hope in terms of how everything works out, especially Jalen Washington. Can he stay healthy or out of foul trouble? And you can kind of go down that list. So I think it just, once again, I don't think increases the ceiling that much, but at the same time, it almost reduces the floor if somebody were to get hurt or some, one or two pieces aren't working out. Because we've always said positions 1 through 4, that 1 through 3.5, A plus, from a grading perspective. But then what is that 4 and the 5? How does that look? And this is not a perfect solve for it, but at the same time, it provides more versatility and options based on those different team matchups or the situations that may happen as the season progresses.
And, we've talked about this a little bit, but the fact that there is going to be a need to replace a large chunk of rebounds, you alluded to it a second ago. I think this gives you another body that, in case you get into foul trouble, you've got a guy that can rebound. You've got a guy that's proven at the ACC level that he can rebound. You've got a guy that is going to push other players in practice to demonstrate that they're able to rebound. And if they can't demonstrate that, then he's probably going to eat up some of those minutes. So knowing the premium that's going to be placed upon both offensive and defensive rebounding for the coming season. I think this is a good ad. And I want to reiterate Sean's point earlier about, this isn't a guy that's coming in competing for starter minutes. He's not a 5-star player. He's not an elite player. But as his former coach said, lunch pail guy, going to grind, going to go in and really be a great practice player. And when he gets in a game, will probably give you a net positive. Sean, is there something about this that you feel like might be a hidden plus? Is there something that that maybe North Carolina doesn't see right now that adding a player like Tyzhaun Claude could help with?
It's a good question, and one I don't have a direct answer for right now. I think last year when they signed Paxton Wojcik really early in the transfer period, there was questions as to why was he coming. But I think when we did this type of podcast last year, we were able to say, hey, he's going to bring that intensity and that energy, and he's not going to detract from a team perspective. And I don't think it's going to be at that level from the maybe intensity, but I think that's what my hope is in terms of contributing to the overall team perspective and the chemistry, and bringing that, bringing some of the other opportunities that he does that could exist. So that's what I'm looking for.
Since Sherelle's not here to stop me, I'll go ahead and be the first one to go on record and call him Tyzhaun Claude Van Dam. He's going to come in and he's going to bring roundhouses to all the practices. But that's going to be this episode of the Coast to Coast. Really short one, just an emergency pod, just to let you guys know that Tyzhaun Claude has decided to join the North Carolina Tar Heels for this coming season. He's instantly eligible. That was not something that he expected when he entered the portal, and that immediately made him attractive to North Carolina. Just found out a few days ago that he was eligible, and North Carolina is his landing spot. He will, like Sean said, he's more of a post player in a four-man's body. But when you get somebody that has that sort of ACC experience, and you have a chance to add him because you have open scholarships this time of year, you add him. Sean, anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
No, that's it. So we'll be, looking forward to seeing how everything progresses, and I think over the next few weeks of trying to figure out what that right role could be for him.
Yeah, and that'll be fun to see too. Once this team starts actually practicing with him, who knows? There may be ways the staff figures out to deploy him that none of us had thought about. But I want to give a shout out to Sherelle, who is on vacation. And it was hard to do this without him, but Sean, I appreciate you stepping up, man. You stepped up when we had some adversity, and you really showed that you're a true team player. I know that Mr. Claude's first stop when he gets settled in Chapel Hill will be to Johnny T-shirt. We appreciate them sponsoring us, and we also appreciate Congruity sponsoring us. Be sure to check them out, congruityhr/Tar Heels. Get your free business assessment for your small or medium-sized business. We appreciate them sponsoring the show. For Sean Moran, I am Joey Powell. Shout out to John Siegley for producing. This has been a special edition emergency pod, Coast to Coast podcast for InsideCarolina.com. We will talk to you all very, very soon.